Mayday, mayday, mayday. Mayday, mayday, mayday. All free citizens. Mayday, mayday, mayday. All that can hear. America has been overthrown. Repeat, America has been overthrown. Communist occupation. Repeat, heavy communist occupation. Location 15 degrees, 2415 north, by 30 degrees east, 103. Repeat, 15 degrees, 2415 north, 30 degrees east, 10, 3. We're surrounded. We're surrounded. All comms are unsecure. Repeat, all comms are unsecure. The media has been taken over. Repeat, emergency. Mayday, mayday. All media has been taken over. Request information. Repeat, request information. Find Covert Radio. Repeat, Charlie, Oscar, Victor, Echo, Romeo, Tango. Repeat, Covert Radio. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Pan, 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 pan. This is Covert Radio, and this is fearlessly unapologetic talk radio. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is an unbelievable emergency broadcast. Pan, 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 pan. This is an unbelievable broadcast, and I'm going to get to it right now because I want this to be as short as physically possible so you guys can share this as much as you can and understand what happened. There has been a coup of the government. There has been a coup of the United States government, and the facts that surround that and the events that surround that are pretty much undeniable. And which has me so shaken about this is that Covert Radio is I'm addicted to information. I'm addicted to finding information. I'm addicted to investigating. And once I focus on something, I'm relentless. It's relentless. And I am relentless. And over the years, we've had a team put together and, people have been added, people have been removed. So let me tell you that we got an army you can see and an army you don't know nothing about. There's two things that I want to cover with you first before I get into an article written by a person named Rittiger. And it's just mind-blowing. I mean, it's jaw-dropping. Again, because, and the reason I'm saying that, now I pay attention to a lot of, and I'm throwing up quotations, truth sayers, and not one time have I ever heard anybody say this. Which adds to the, my own opinion that, and the question of how high does this go? Did this go all the way to Trump? Because it was Trump that put these people at the Capitol on January the 6th. You see the screen? It was people like Alex Jones who put these people People like Gavin McGinnis brought them to the Capitol. When in reality, it was well known that there was going to be legal precedent set that day on the House floor. There was going to be a legal precedent set so that in reality and legality, all the way to the Supreme Court, the election could have been contested legally. But that's not what happened. All they have to say now is January 6th. That's all they have to say. Just like 9/11, all they have to say is 9/11. That's it. That's all you need to know. 9/11. Yeah, why do I not have the same rights? Why can't I photograph? I'm a photographer. I can't photograph this building on a foggy night. No, why? 9/11. I'm on a public sidewalk. I mean, I have a fucking $2,000 camera, and I mean, I can't take pictures at 3 a.m. of a building with perfect fog and dreary lighting. No, why? Oh, 9/11. Oh, that's why. Okay. So, I mean, and that's just a minuscule example of how our rights have been trampled on for the last 20 some years. And now how the country has been overthrown for the last 3 years by communists. By communist. You see the screen? Mitch McConnell, Pelosi. There's two things I need you to understand. And look in the comments section right now, because I'm going to put a pinned comment from myself with a timestamp. That timestamp is going to take you directly to this article that I'm going to go over. If you do already understand what a think tank is, and more importantly, if you understand parliamentary law or parliamentary procedure. If you understand both of those things, look in the comment section to the top comment. There's a pinned comment by me with a timestamp that's going to take you directly to the article. If not, I need you to understand two things. Number one, a think tank. Think tanks are very simple. It's a group of people. These people are very, 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 very smart. And they do things like research, or they come up with, ideas, or they can come up with strategies for different things. They can create plans, create social policies. They can come up with political strategies. They can maybe come up with military strategy. There actually are military think tanks that are just focused on military operations. And, it's like sitting in a room and playing Risk all day, or with very smart people, or sitting in a room and playing chess all day, except the world is the chessboard, or America is the chessboard, or all of North America is the chessboard. And they come up with strategies and plans and, the way to move culture to a certain, area that they want people to be in, confused or fighting with each other. Let's focus on race. Let's put the Dylan Mulvaney's up. Let's get people fighting, talking, distraction. That's just like all the podcasts. It's just so, it's amazing, man. It's amazing. Who do you listen to anymore? This is the Roman bread and circus all over again. Who do you listen to? Everybody and their mother has podcasts now. Everybody's a celebrity. Everybody's an influencer. Really? That's why you need the gift of discernment. Because if you don't know who you're listening to, and it seems like they're telling you 90% of the truth, then, okay, yeah, that, but it doesn't matter. That 10% is where the agendas are, where the strategies are, where the think tanks come in. These people are experts at strategy, okay? And I'm telling you, in my opinion, what you're looking at was a military operation. that's been in the plans for at least a year. And they had actually backup plans if they couldn't get people moving through the Capitol fast enough. Because it was timed within 3 minutes. Do you understand what I just said? 3 minutes made all the difference of what happened in being able to contest the electoral vote. So that there would be legal standing in every court in every state that objected to the certification of Joe Biden as president. It was all halted because of an emergency. And guess what? When there's an emergency, there's a whole different set of parliamentary rules that come into play. That leads me to the second thing you must understand. I, Covert Radio, cannot tell you a lot about me because of the lunatics that listen to me. And the hateful racist that listen to me. But I can tell you this. I have a great understanding of parliamentary procedure. And if you don't know what it is, it's a system of basically governance, I guess you could say, or etiquette, maybe, I guess, that's been handed down for thousands of years. The Greeks had a parliament. The Romans. You know, why do you think Washington... Look at this building. Look at any ancient Roman building. And you'd be like, is this a building in Washington, D.C., or is this in Rome, like ancient Rome? Okay, you see what I mean? It's all been handed down. It's been handed down. The Greeks, the Romans, the Anglo-Saxons, and then the British. And around the 14th century, it was called the Great Council. That's when it was converted into what we have today, basically the English Parliament. Back in the day in Britain, the Parliament made up basically a lot of the elite, the barons of the time. They were invited individually. They could come and they could have, counsel with the king. It was called the king's business. And not only that, they could talk, with each other. They could, they didn't have to take horses and carriages to, tracts of land that were 10,000 acres and take you 2 days to get to another millionaire of that time to talk about things. There was no phones. There was, you know what I mean? Everything had to be done in purpose or in person. The king's business, right? That's when they all got together. But it's all changed. Really did it, though? Because our parliamentary procedure, our congressmen, instead of the barons, the rich, Bill Gateses and just name them, whoever, Elon Musk and name them. Instead of them being invited into our parliament, into our Congress, instead of that, they just buy congressmen now that work for them. Or congresswomen, whatever. They're the ones that do the bidding of the elite, of the barons of our day. But really, I mean, if you want to get technical, the barons really do still meet, but it's under, different, different guises of leadership, where it's the World Economic Forum or, one of the bigger ones that they can't even hide anymore is the Bilderberg Group, which it just so happens it was just the 69th meeting of the Bilderbergs, which are the elite of the elite. And Harry Kissinger has been there every time. Every time. The meeting just took place in Lisbon, Portugal. So it wrapped up yesterday. So here's the thing, though. Parliamentary procedure in the United States is based off the Westminster system. And here's why this is important. Because it is a law. It's a procedure. It's a set of rules. Our system is called American procedures. And people all over the world, governments all over the world have adopted our version of it. It's favored over the Westminster system. But even though our system is based off of Westminster Parliament. And just to give you an idea, if you don't know, again, what parliamentary procedure is, I know you've heard this. You'll hear bum, 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 dun, 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 when you watch the State of the Union address. And then there's a presiding officer that will come out and address all, the whole entire Congress. And they'll say, Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States. Dun, 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 and then he comes walking in the middle aisle. You have the Democrats on the right or left or right, whatever. Left, right, left. Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other. You know what I mean? But what I'm telling you, though, is the term Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, they say that because of parliamentary procedure. They can't say, Mrs. Pelosi, I give you. No, it's parliamentary procedure. Madam Speaker, I give you. Mr. Speaker, I present to you. I give you. So, you've heard it. That's just a whiff of parliamentary procedure. And if you've ever watched on YouTube, like any of the, when they're amending bills or debating, the House is going over legislature or the Senate even or whatever. But, when there's an open floor, you're going to hear certain things like, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California. Somebody's talking and they can yield their time because everything's timed. There's there's an allotment of time for this. There's an allotment of time for that. You have 45 minutes for this. That's what the filibuster's for. The filibuster, you've heard a lot about that over the last few years. That is a parliamentary procedure. And just to give you the specifics of it, say like Senator Ted Cruz, say I'm a congressman and I want to yield my time to Ted Cruz, who's, in my party. I can't say I yield the rest of my time to Ted Cruz. You can't say that. It won't be recognized legally. You have to say I yield however amount of time to the gentleman from the state that they represent. Or the district that they represent, depending on where you're at in the Capitol, what House or Senate, whatever area you're in. There's not only that, the Senate has their own set of rules called the standing rules of the Senate. And there's like 45 or 50 rules for that. And again, the filibuster is one of them. I'm just giving you an idea. Okay, this is where the article is going to start. Because you have to understand how legally they stole the election. The title of the article, again, is The Parliamentary Motive Behind the J6 Fedsurrection. You know what the ring of truth is? Edith Wharton. I am too well accustomed to the taking of evidence not to detect the ring of truth. She said she's too used to taking evidence, to hearing it and taking it down. She's so used to that, she knows when she's hearing the ring of truth. 1908, Edith Wharton. Much has been made of the events of January 6, 2021, with the latest broadcast of CCTV video from inside the Capitol Hill complex. More questions have been raised. And through the whole hearings and everything that has been going on, there have been video after video after video from inside Capitol Hill of the Capitol Police removing barricades, escorting people into certain corridors, waving their arms, come on, come on, come on. They're pointing this way, go, and walking that way, walking this way. I mean, how would Mary Jo and Jim Bob America from Kansas City, Missouri, how would they know how to get to the inner chambers of the Capitol? How would they know that? What do you think? It's like walking into Walmart and trying to find the electronics section. You think there's only one hallway that you go down and you're right into the most powerful people on the planet? Or do you go through metal detectors and checklists and doors and areas of security and more doors and another corridor? And all the CCTV videos that have been coming up have shown that's exactly what the Capitol Police was doing, escorting people around. Within the questions, the FBI and the government apparatus had advanced knowledge of the scale of the J6 mall assembly that you see on the screen here, yet they did nothing? Where were the Capitol Hill police never informed of the FBI concerns? Where were they? Why weren't they? And why didn't House Speaker Nancy Pelosi secure the Capitol Hill complex? And why did she deny the request by President Trump to call up the National Guard for security support? This, again, all came out in hearings. There's text messages, there's emails or whatever that came out that said Trump absolutely did say, hey, this is going to be big. We bring in the National Guard. And why didn't she? If you notice, they did after the fact, after they solidified the election and stole it. They surrounded the complex with barbed wire and National Guard then, so you really couldn't do anything about it, right? Why did the FBI have agent provocateurs in the crowd, seemingly stimulating rage within a peaceful crowd to enter the Capitol building? There have always been these nagging questions around why. Rittiger has spent a great deal of time reviewing the entire process, looking at the granular timeline, and then overlaying the bigger picture of the constitutional and parliamentary process itself. Those are the two key words. What they did followed constitutional and parliamentary processes legally. They legally did this. And what follows, what I'm about to tell you, is a brilliant analysis of the federal government's motive to create a January 6th crisis. And that would permit House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to trigger what's called an emergency session. And by doing that, they would avoid the 2020 election certification challenges. Again, it was only 3 minutes later after those challenges hit the floor that they started escorting people out of the chambers. Everything changed at that moment. Those congressional floor challenges, known and anticipated well in advance the morning of January 6th, they would have formed a legal and constitutional basis for standing in judicial challenges that would have eventually reached the Supreme Court. The certification during an emergency session eliminated that problem. You see what they did? Here's how Rittiger explains this. I think most of all, not all, but a large number of people are totally missing what happened and why this happened on January the 6th. I'm going to try my best to outline the events of the day, and I'm going to blast past the commonly held assumptions, and we're going to get right down to the core of the corruption and what happened. So I'm going to present this in a series of questions and answers. Here's question 1. How do you prevent Congress from delaying the certification of state electoral votes? Well, it requires a crisis. A crisis that creates an emergency. An emergency that invokes special House rules based on parliamentary law. Remember carefully, and you should maybe take notes if you're going to talk about this on your channels. focus, okay? Please focus on what I'm telling you. Just moments, literally 3 minutes before two representatives issued a vote for motions to suspend the certification, the House members were informed by Capitol Police and other agents that a protest was about to breach the chambers. It was at this time that the key people that would be needed to be in the chamber were removed. They were seen on camera and on surveillance being walked out and escorted out of the chamber. Those people, the key people, Pence, Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, and Mitch McConnell. They can all be seen being escorted out of the chamber, and at that very moment, that effectively halted the entire parliamentary chamber process. That stopped everything dead in its tracks. Here's another question. Why was it necessary to halt the chamber process? Well, here's the answer. The crisis was created to eliminate the motion challenges, to halt the certification, and to begin voting to look into voting irregularities and fraud. That's why it was necessary to cause this. Because if those motions were able to get what's legally called standing, the process would have started to look into voting irregularities and fraud. That all went away once there was an emergency session declared. Here's the facts. The two motions are completely legal and constitutional under at least two of the constitutionally recognized procedures. And these procedures would require the House to pause the certification and then vote to determine whether the motions of suspend could move forward. And I'm going to show you something. There was more than one or two people, congressmen and women, ready and waiting to move standing motions forward on the floor legally to start the investigation. Here's the proof of it. I want you to watch this. And just so you know, this guy right here with his mask pulled down is Representative Paul Gosar. He's a Republican from Arizona. He was the first one to object to Biden's Electoral College win. He was the first one. Ted Cruz stood right up beside him. 3 minutes later, all hell broke loose and everything was suspended. Now you tell me, watch this.
I rise up for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
Is the objection in writing and signed by a senator?
Yes, it is.
It is.
I rise up for myself and 60 of my colleagues to object to the counting of the electoral ballots from Arizona.
Is the objection?
It was all erased. It was all erased. Here's another question. Why, or what was so important to refuse this motion and the subsequent votes to suspend the electoral certification? Why was it so important that they had to refuse this motion? Even though Pence, you hear him. Okay, was it signed off? Yeah, he's following the law, the parliamentary law, the constitutional law. And if those were able to continue without no interruptions from people trying to get into the Capitol at the behest of Trump and Alex Jones and a bunch of other, people at the top of the Republican Party or whatever, however, the conservatives. That's what I'm telling you. How high does this go? Trump knew that these senators were going to contest the electoral vote. Why would he even take the chance? You see what I mean? Wake up. This is why it was so important that they refuse the motion and the votes that would be required. All the senators that stood up and members that stood up to suspend the electoral certification. They had to remove the process entirely and continue the fraud and certify the fraud, and along with no detractors on record. Everything was done to a T. This effectively gave no standing, which is a legal term. This gave no standing for the Secretary of the United States ruling to appeal. There was nothing to appeal. There was no standing to appeal it. The certification. Listen, understand this. If those two motions, or even just one, would have been successfully voted on, if they were allowed to be voted on, and there was no interruption or everybody had to be escorted out of the chamber, none of that happened. I mean, even if they were denied in the vote later, in the session, later in the day there, because that was around 1:00 in the afternoon, that would give those same people who presented those, they would still have standing for a constitutional legal argument. But again, it was all erased. Here's another question. Could this have been done some other way other than creating a crisis or a protest or an emergency crisis situation? Pretty much no. There's no other way they could have pulled this off. In order to prevent those two motions, would require that the Speaker of the House, the minority leader, and the President of the Congress, which is Pence, he was the Vice President of the United States, they would not be present in the chambers. That's the only other way they could have prevented those two motions. And every single one of them were in the chambers. Pelosi, McConnell, Schumer, Pence. They were all there until 3 minutes, a 3-minute window when those motions were made public and a bunch of Republicans stood up and started clapping. This election was going to be overturned legally. Here's the other thing to consider. Once the Capitol Police and other law enforcement agents informed the Speaker and the three others, Pelosi unilaterally, under the emergency rules, she suspended the business of the Congress. She had the power. Under emergency rules, she alone could suspend the business of the Congress. And that's what she did. This protest was necessary to do that. The crisis was created because there's no other way to suspend the business of certification unilaterally. So by creating this crisis, it would invoke emergency procedures to be started immediately. There's no other circumstances other than like a war or an attack or some mass, simultaneous problem attacking a bunch of, members of the House. Nothing else would have stopped this. Nothing would give her the power to unilaterally suspend the certification or the business of the House that day, the business of the Congress. Here's another question. Why did the motions, once that, because they reconvened later that day. Why did those motions, once the speaker reconvened Congress, why didn't they move back again to the floor for votes? Why didn't they just pick up right where they left off? Why were the members not allowed to even consider putting forward any motions on the floor when the chamber business was reopened? Here's why. The Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, initiated what's called the new session under special emergency rules. She initiated the new session under special emergency rules. Now, these rules, according to the Constitution and parliamentary law, these rules abandon and it makes clear that the only purpose of the new session was to expedite the certification and dismiss all prior regular session procedural rules. This is why those two motions that were on the floor for the voters to consider and debate that would literally cause the certification to stop. Biden would not be certified. The electoral votes would not be certified. With the new session, none of it ever happened later that day. None of it ever happened. It never came back to the floor. Under the new session, expedited emergency rules. You see what they did? So here's another question. Other than new rules, emergency rules, what other peculiar things occurred when the speaker reconvened? Well, I'll tell you, members were allowed to vote in proxy, remotely, while not being present. They could be anywhere. They could have been anywhere. They could have been in a bunker 20 miles under D.C. They could have been in a room with a gun to their head. Literally. You can use your own imagination about what conditions were placed on all of the members during this time to prevent anyone from getting out of line. And I'm dead serious about that. I mean, this was a coup. This was an overthrow of our process of an election, a presidential election. And then they surrounded the crime scene with barbed wire and military. And let me make this clear. It was also at the new session that Vice President Pence, who again is the president of the Congress, he would have no ability to even consider pausing the electoral certification. And there was text messages at 1 a.m. earlier on January the 6th from Trump. There was a text message that came out at 1 a.m. And because, there's an entire timeline down to the minute of like a month, really, or a few months of what happened. Wednesday, January 6, 2021, early morning before 9 a.m. At 1 a.m. in the morning, Trump made a tweet. If Vice President Mike Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. That was at 1 a.m. Early morning, January 6th. If Pence comes through for us, we will win the presidency. But under the new session, this new emergency session, Pence has no power. He had no ability to even consider pausing the electoral certification because there were no motions of disagreements on the matter, because those motions never made it to the new session floor. So technically, legally, what he claimed under oath was correct. He said he had no constitutional authority to address any issues of fraud or doubt about the electoral irregularities. But what he never told the American people is that he dismisses the fact that Congress was running under rules created in a crisis and emergency situation. Because of the crisis emergency session, those rules never allowed for those objections to be floored again. I want you to understand what happened, and I hope you're as shook as I am, because it's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. This was a coup. It was a very organized and carefully planned out coup. In the beginning of Covert Radio, I scream, America has been overthrown. What more proof do you need? Pence, without a doubt, as well as most members of the House, they were all aware of how the certification was going to be managed. They're not going to tell me that they didn't know. And it would require new rules to prevent the debate clause from occurring. And these are new rules that only an emergency crisis could create. So they created the emergency. I'm Covert Radio. We got an army you can see and an army you don't know nothing about.